Hey Reddit, I've been lurking here for years, but I've never had a reason to post until now. What happened to me last week still haunts my every waking moment, and I need to get it off my chest. This is the first time I've ever experienced anything like this, and I hope it's the last. I've always had trouble sleeping. Insomnia runs in my family, but I've managed it well enough with medication and a strict bedtime routine. Last week, everything changed. It started like any other night. I took my meds, read a few chapters of a book, and turned off the lights at 11 p.m. sharp. I drifted off fairly quickly, but something felt different. My sleep was restless, filled with disjointed dreams that seemed too real. Around 3 a.m., I woke up suddenly. My eyes were open, but I couldn't move. My chest felt heavy, like something was sitting on it. I've heard of sleep paralysis before, but I'd never experienced it. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was just my brain playing tricks on me. But then I saw it. A shadowy figure stood at the foot of my bed. It was tall, almost reaching the ceiling, and its presence filled the room with an oppressive weight. It didn't have a face, just an inky blackness where its features should be. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My body was frozen, completely paralyzed. The figure moved closer, and the air grew colder. I could hear a faint whispering, but I couldn't make out the words. The shadow leaned over me, and I felt its icy breath on my face. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. Then, without warning, it vanished. When night fell, I reluctantly crawled under the covers, praying that it was just a one-time occurrence. I was wrong. The next few nights were a blur of terror and sleeplessness. Every time I drifted off, the shadow would return. It would stand in the corner of my room watching me with those empty eyes. Each time it got a little closer. I tried everything to stop it. I rearranged my room, kept the lights on, even burned sage like I read in some forum. Nothing worked. On the fifth night, it happened again. This time the shadow was right beside my bed. Its whispers were louder, almost understandable. I felt a cold hand on my arm, and I thought I was going to die from fright. Just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone, leaving me trembling and drenched in sweat. I couldn't take it anymore. I went to a sleep specialist, hoping they could help. They prescribed stronger medication and suggested some relaxation techniques. Desperate, I followed their advice to the letter. It helped, but only a little. The shadow still came, but it was weaker, less substantial. I could almost convince myself it wasn't real. The first thing I did the next morning was call my parents. They live a few hours away, but I needed to hear their voices. My mom has always been my rock, and I hoped she could offer some comfort or advice. When I told her what had been happening, she was surprisingly calm. She listened quietly, and then told me something I hadn't expected. When she was my age, she'd experienced something similar. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, unable to move, and see a shadowy figure standing over her. It went on for months before it finally stopped. She never told anyone because she thought they would think she was crazy. Hearing this was both comforting and terrifying. It meant I wasn't alone, but it also meant this might not end anytime soon. My mom suggested I come home for a few days to rest and get away from whatever was haunting me. Father Thomas arrived that afternoon. He was a kind, elderly man who'd known my family for years. I felt a sense of calm just being around him. He listened to my story with a grave expression and then suggested we perform a blessing on the house and me. I wasn't particularly religious, but I was willing to try anything at this point. We started with a prayer in the living room, then moved to each room in the house. Father Thomas sprinkled holy water and recited prayers asking for protection and peace. When we reached my bedroom, I felt a chill run down my spine. The shadow's presence was stronger here. Father Thomas seemed to sense it too. He spent extra time blessing the room, making sure to cover every corner. After the blessing, I felt a bit more at ease. That night, I went to bed with a glimmer of hope. Maybe this would finally be over. I fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the lack of rest. But once again, I woke up around 3 a.m. paralyzed. The shadow was back, but this time, it was different. It was standing at the foot of my bed, but it seemed hesitant, almost weaker. The whispers were still there, but they were faint, as if they were struggling to reach me. I focused all my energy on moving, on breaking free from the paralysis. Slowly I managed to move my fingers, then my hand. As I gained more control over my body, the shadow started to fade. I could feel its grip loosening. Finally I managed to sit up, and the shadow vanished completely. I was drenched in sweat, but for the first time in days I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe the blessing had worked after all. I stayed with my parents for a few more days, and each night the shadow's presence grew weaker. By the end of the week, I was able to sleep through the night without any disturbances. I decided it was time to go back to my own apartment and face whatever was left. However, last night things took a turn for the worse. I woke up around 3 a.m. unable to move. The shadow was back, but this time it was different. It had a face, a grotesque, twisted face with empty eye sockets and a mouth that seemed to stretch into an unnatural grin. It whispered my name over and over, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. I fought with everything I had to move, to scream, to do anything to break free. Just as I thought I would be trapped forever, my body jerked awake. The shadow was gone, but the terror lingered. I don't know how much more of this I can take. I'm afraid to sleep, afraid of what I'll see, afraid of what it wants. Desperate for answers, I turned to the internet. I scoured forums and websites dedicated to sleep paralysis and shadow figures. I found countless stories similar to mine, but no concrete solutions. Some people suggested it was a manifestation of stress or anxiety. Others believed it was something more sinister, a malevolent spirit or demon. One post caught my eye. It was from someone who claimed to have experienced the same thing and found a way to banish the shadow. They recommended a combination of meditation, protection rituals, and surrounding oneself with positive energy. It sounded a bit out there, but I was willing to try anything. I started meditating daily, focusing on calming my mind and visualizing a protective barrier around me. I also began keeping a journal, documenting my experiences and any dreams or thoughts that seemed relevant. I hoped that by confronting my fears head-on, I could weaken the shadow's hold on me. The first few nights were tough. I still woke up around 3 a.m., but the shadow seemed less menacing. It was still there, but it didn't come as close, and the whispers were fainter. I continued with my routine, determined to reclaim my sleep and my sanity. One night, while meditating, I had a breakthrough. I remembered something from my childhood, a memory I'd long forgotten. When I was about 8 years old, I had a recurring nightmare about a shadowy figure. It would stand at the foot of my bed, just like now, and I would wake up screaming. My parents took me to a therapist, who helped me overcome the fear. Eventually the nightmares stopped, and I forgot about them. Could it be that this shadow was the same one from my childhood? Was it somehow connected to my past fears and traumas? The thought sent a chill down my spine, but it also gave me a sense of purpose. I decided to confront the shadow head-on. That night I went to bed with a newfound determination. When I woke up around 3 a.m. I was paralyzed as usual, but this time I wasn't afraid. The shadow was there, its grotesque face leering at me. But instead of trying to move or scream, I focused on my breathing and my protective barrier. I stared at the shadow, refusing to let it intimidate me. I repeated a mantra in my mind, something I'd read in one of the forums. "You have no power over me, I am not afraid." The shadow seemed to waver, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. I continued to repeat the mantra, pouring all my energy into it. Slowly the shadow began to retreat. Its whispers grew fainter, and its form became less defined. I could feel its grip loosening, and I fought to move my body. With a final surge of effort, I broke free from the paralysis and sat up. The shadow was gone, and I felt a sense of victory. Over the next few nights I continued my routine. The shadow still appeared occasionally, but each time it was weaker, less substantial. I could sense that its hold on me was breaking. I kept meditating, journaling, and surrounding myself with positive energy. One night, as I was meditating before bed, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew deep down that I had won. I went to bed that night and slept soundly, without any interruptions. The shadow was gone, and I finally felt free. It's been a few weeks now, and I haven't had any more episodes of sleep paralysis. The fear that once consumed me has been replaced with a sense of strength and resilience. I still meditate and journal, and I continue to surround myself with positive energy. I'm not taking any chances. I wanted to share my story here in case it helps someone else going through a similar experience. Sleep paralysis and shadow figures are terrifying, but they can be defeated. If anyone has any questions or needs support, feel free to reach out. We're all in this together. Thank you for listening, Reddit. Stay strong, and don't let the shadows win.